my God.
This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Peter Jennings at ABC News headquarters. The country's trying to get itself back together again, as you know. Very difficult in some places, a little easier in some other places. Everybody, of course, clearly thinking what's happened. We've interrupted very briefly now because the President has gone over to the Pentagon this morning to talk to the members of the staff there. And here's a little bit of what he had to say.
The Secretary told me about how you conducted your business on that fateful day. I want to congratulate you and thank you. Many of your members of the Pentagon press went out to help in the evacuation and the aid of the people who worked here in the Pentagon, and the country appreciates that very much. And thank you. Pass the word on to your colleagues as well. Today we're talking about the mobilization of reserve and guard troops. Such a mobilization is a strong symbol of this nation's resolve. And I want to thank the Secretary and David and members of our team for giving me a complete and full briefing. I fully understand that a mobilization affects the lives of thousands of Americans. I mean, after all, we're talking about somebody's mom or somebody's dad, somebody's employee, somebody's friend or somebody's neighbor. But the world will see that the strength of this nation is found in the character and dedication and courage of everyday citizens. Last week I proclaimed a national emergency and authorized the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of Transportation to call up the ready reserve units of the Armed Forces and the Coast Guards to active duty. We are in the process of calling up as many as 35,000 such troops. They will serve in a number of essential roles. They will help maintain our air defenses so they can stay on high alert. They will check shipping in ports. They will help our military with airlift and logistics. They will provide military police. They will participate in engineering projects. They will help gather intelligence. And they will perform work as chaplains. I know this means a lot of sacrifice for those who will be called up and their families. But you understand, the troops who will be called up understand better than most that freedom has a cost and that we're willing to bear that cost. An act of war has been committed on this country, and the dedication of our guardsmen and reservists will serve not only as a strong symbol to all that we're prepared to take the necessary actions, but will be a part of helping define the spirit and courage of America. And I'm grateful. I want to thank the employers who understand that there is more to corporate life than just profit and loss. That the employee who is getting ready to serve the country is an essential part of winning the, of defeating terrorism. Evildoers so emboldened that they feel like they could attack the great bastion of freedom. Before I answer a few questions, I also want to wish the American Jewish community and Jews around the world a healthy and happy New Year. As the high holy days begin, I know you'll find strength and determination during this time of reflection. I'll be glad to answer a few questions. Ron.
Mr. President, does the cost of freedom today in this war you're about to wage include the loss of civilian and military casualties? And can you keep us out of a depression, recession during this crisis?
The only thing I can do is reflect upon the spirit of the U.S. military. And the U.S. military is ready to defend freedom at any cost. The men and women who wear our uniforms, both active duty and reservists and National Guards people, are ready to respond to the call of the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of Defense. There's no question in my mind that the resolve of our military has never been stronger. And we will win the war, and there will be costs. But the military folks understand that, and so do I, and so does the Secretary of Defense. In terms of our economy, I've got great faith in the economy. I understand it's tough right now. Transportation business is hurting. Obviously, the market was correcting prior to this crisis. But the underpinnings for economic growth are there. We're the greatest entrepreneurial society in the world. We got the best farmers and ranchers. We've got a strong manufacturing base. But there's a challenge ahead of us, and I'm confident that our business community will rise to the challenge. Secondly, I'm confident we can work with Congress to come up with an economic stimulus package, if need be, that will send a clear signal to the risk takers and capital formators of our country that the government's going to act too. Thirdly, we've got a tax cut that's still working its way through the economy, as well as a reconstruction plan for New York and the area. And after all, the Congress, in a bipartisan fashion, overwhelmingly passed a supplemental of billions of dollars, which will help not only get New York City up and running again, but will help provide some economic stimulus.
Mr. President, the airline industry in particular is in trouble and looking for some relief. I know that Secretary of the Netherlands is supposed to meet with representatives from the industry this week. As you look down the road, do you think they can expect some...
Stretch, I think these are the kinds of subjects that we will talk with the Secretary of Transportation, with the airline industry, and as importantly, with members of Congress. Congress must be involved with, obviously, with these deliberations, and I look forward to, I've already encouraged my administration to reach out to members of Congress, and we will continue doing so.
Mr. President,
Patsy.
The Taliban apparently has refused to hand over Osama bin Laden to the Pakistanis. Does this mean that the U.S. is prepared to move militarily?
Patsy, I want to make it clear to the American people that that this administration will not talk about any plans we may or may not have. We will not jeopardize in any way, shape, or form anybody who wears the uniform of the United States. All I can tell you is that Osama bin Laden is a prime suspect, and the people who house him, encourage him, provide food, comfort, or money are on notice. Last week, I spoke clearly about our nation's policy, and that is we're going to find those those evildoers, those barbaric people who attacked our country, and we're going to hold them accountable, and we're going to hold the people who house them accountable. The people who think they can provide them safe havens will be held accountable. The people who feed them will be held accountable. And the Taliban must take my statement seriously. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. President, is it the case, based on what you said now, that war is inevitable? And can you tell the American people what that war is going to look like?
I believe, I know that an act of war was declared against America. But this will be a different type of war than we're used to. This is, in the past, there have been, beaches to storm, and islands to conquer. We've been able to watch on our television screens sophisticated weaponry find a building, and we've seen, dramatic reports from the front where, a Pulitzer Prize-to-be winning reporter stood up and declared, the United States is attacked, and all that. There may be some of that, who knows, but I know that this is a different type of enemy than we're used to. It's an enemy that likes to hide and burrow in, and their network is extensive. There's no rules. It's barbaric, behavior. They slit throats of women on airplanes in order to achieve an objective that is beyond comprehension. And they like to hit, and then they like to hide out. But we're going to smoke them out. And we're adjusting our thinking to the new type of enemy. These are terrorists that have no borders. And by the way, it's important for the world to understand that we know in America that more than just Americans suffered loss of life in the World Trade Center. People from all kinds of nationalities lost life. That's why the world is rallying to our call to defeat terrorism. Many world leaders understand that the attack could have easily happened on their land. And they also understand that this enemy knows no border. But they know what I know, that when we start putting the heat on those who house them, they will get them running. And once we get them running, we have got a good chance to getting them. And that's exactly what our intent is. The focus right now is on Osama bin Laden, no question about it. He's the prime suspect in his organization. But there are other terrorists in the world. There are people who hate freedom. This is a fight for freedom. This is a fight to say to the freedom-loving people of the world, we will not allow ourselves to be terrorized by somebody who thinks they can hit and hide in some cave somewhere. It's going to require a new thought process. And I'm proud to report our military, led by the Secretary of Defense, understands that. Understands it's a new type of war. It's going to take a long time to win this war. The American people are going to have to be more patient than ever with the efforts of our combined efforts, not just ourselves, but the efforts of our allies, to get them running and to find them and to hunt them down. But as the Secretary of, as the Vice President said, you know, Osama bin Laden is just one person. He is representative of networks of people who absolutely have made their cause to defeat the freedoms that we understand, and we will not allow him to do so.
Mr. You want bin Laden dead?
I want him held. I want justice. And there's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said "Wanted, dead or alive."
That's your opinion. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Long-term? You were saying it's long-term. Do you see an end at all?
I think that this is a long-term battle, war. There'll be battles, but this is long-term. We're after all, our mission is not just Osama bin Laden, the Al-Qaeda organization. Our mission is to battle terrorism and to join with freedom-loving people. We are putting together a coalition that is a coalition dedicated to declaring to the world we will do what it takes to find the terrorists, to rout them out, and to hold them accountable. And the United States is proud to lead the coalition.
Are you saying you want him dead or alive, sir? Can I interpret your...
I just remember, all I'm doing is remembering when I was a kid. I remember that they used to put out there in the Old West a wanted poster. It said, "Wanted, dead or alive." All I want, America wants him brought to justice. That's what we want.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Thank you, guys. See you right. Thank you, sir. See you right.
President there with the Secretary of Defense and his National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, paying a visit to the Pentagon this morning to tell the Pentagon how strongly he feels about the job that they have done, and explaining to them, and because it's on videotape to us and the rest of the country, that he now has the capacity, which he got from Congress, for calling up 35,000 reservists. And he says there are all sorts of work for them to do, from air defenses to working in ports. I assume by that he means tightening up the securities in ports if possible, working on logistics and supply, police work and intelligence. And then he added, very sadly at the end, and also working as chaplains. That would be true for the Pentagon, of course, where not all their missing have been recovered, and it is certainly perhaps true for New York City, where the latest figures of those still listed as missing, a reflection, I think, here that nobody wants to give up the struggle for the living, of 4,957. We're going to smoke them out, the president said, and we are going to put heat on those who house them. To that end, senior Pakistani officials went from next-door Pakistan over into Afghanistan today to try to convince the Taliban leadership there, the leading authority in Afghanistan, to give up Osama bin Laden, to whom they have been giving safe harbor for some lengthy period of time. And at least one report out of Islamabad, the Pakistani capital, says they have failed. There's similarly a dispatch out of Islamabad quoting the Afghanistan radio Shariat, which says the following: the supreme leaders, I beg your pardon, the supreme leader of Afghanistan's clerics, Taliban, will let a Grand Council of Islamic Clerics decide whether to hand Osama bin Laden over to the United States or not. To give you some sense of isolation, severity, in that particular country, Radio Shariat, I think, is the only radio station in the entire world which has neither songs nor music on it. The President spoke very briefly there about his faith in the American economy and said that the business community had understood that there was more to life than profit and loss, and that he very much respected that. The Congress would be involved. The New York Stock Exchange, as you know, opened again today. As of now, I think we can take a quick look at it. The Dow Jones is down about 500 points, 523 points in the moment. The NASDAQ is down 84 points. We've only talked to a couple of people overlooking Wall Street today, and they seem generally to think that there is nothing untoward. In other words, there's no tragedy being worked out on Wall Street today, and there's nothing melodramatic going on at this particular moment, even though the market is down about 532 points. The President said again, as he and his administration, other members of the administration are saying fairly regularly now, when asked if there's an end to this, this is going to be a long war, thinks there'll be some battles won along the way, but this is going to be a long war against international terrorism. He's trying to build a coalition. There was a dispatch from Italy this morning. Italians said they would indeed provide troops if it was needed in the war against terrorism. And there is, of course, still an ongoing process in every capital in the world, in every police and military organization in the world, trying to define precisely what the war is. As for the very broad strokes, I'm joined by John Miller again, who spent so much time with us here. In very broad strokes, any change in the investigations today at all?
There's one angle that's really beginning to pick up steam. One of the individuals in custody who has been shipped to New York and is now being held by federal authorities here is a man who surfaced in a surveillance being conducted by American authorities and authorities in Malaysia back in August. They were watching a meeting in Kuala Lumpur of suspected terrorists involved, or suspected to be involved in the bombing of the USS Cole, when this individual was surveilled at the meeting. He was later identified and put on a watch list of terrorists in the United States, but by then he was already here. Ended up out west trying to take flight simulator lessons to operate a 747. That's pretty much the hottest angle, because that is the one you can interpret as a tacit connection to the bin Laden organization, which is also the prime suspect in the Cole bombing. The fact that he was meeting with principal operators of that organization in Malaysia. Of course, the rest is 5 being held in New York, 25 on immigration holds, 100 still being sought. That's a list they update every 8 hours.
Oh, that's interesting. Thanks very much, John. Updating the list of those who may be on a watch list or who may be potentially arrested every 8 hours. We'll keep you up to date even more regularly than that. A quick check-in with ABC's John McCarthy at the Pentagon. John, one senses that everywhere in the world people are tightening up at the moment, trying to make decisions about this coalition the President speaks to, and making commitments or hesitating about commitments.
They are beginning to speak, Peter, in some very interesting ways in several countries that surround Afghanistan, India and Uzbekistan. They have both indicated publicly that they would be willing to have American troops operate from their territory. Of course, the government of Iran has not volunteered that, but they have been critical of the act of terrorism. These are important indications. Also, of course, Pakistan sending a delegation to try to lobby the Taliban to turn Osama bin Laden over. Important. Part of what the President was talking about here at the Pentagon, not only are they putting up this big air defense system over the United States, they're also going to have to check ports and all the ships that come into the United States. There are an estimated 70,000 ships a year that come into the United States. They're trying to figure a way, using the Coast Guard and the Navy, to check every one of them out as they come into port. It's a huge task.
Many thanks, John McWethy over at the Pentagon. Huge task in every respect. Terry Moran joined us from the White House. We're waiting, by the way, at the moment, Terry, as you know, for the Attorney General to come out and give us his perspective on the current state of investigation. President certainly was outspokenly strong this morning in terms of his language, wanted dead or alive.
That's George W. Bush, the image he likes to present, and it's probably one that the public will receive very gladly. He's, without question, stoking the fires of the American people, but they're also doing something else here today, Peter, and we heard the president talk about how we're going to win this war, but there will be costs. The officials are trying to lay the groundwork for preparing the American people for casualties. White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer saying this morning, this means America's preparing for war, and that does include risks and the possibilities of harm coming to Americans, including at home. One other note, very important this afternoon, the president will be leaving the White House again and going to an Islamic Society Center in Washington, D.C. to meet with Islamic clerics and congregants. This a message to people at home, not to discriminate against people on the basis of their ethnic origin or faith. It's also a message directed overseas at all those critical Islamic countries which need to be enlisted in this, and so that is going to be a very important visit this afternoon.
Okay, Terry, just hang over this for a second. I'll just bring people up a little bit to date on some of the other things that we think are going on overseas. As you know, we said the Pakistanis had gone over to Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, to try to get the Taliban to give Osama bin Laden up. No success there, at least as we hear so far. The Pakistani army says the Taliban has deployed about 20 to 25,000 fighters just across the Khyber Pass, that extraordinary pass which appears in so much history and literature, which goes from Afghanistan to Pakistan. The Taliban have also closed their country's airspace and placed all of their air defenses on alert. They may not be necessarily meager, after all. Remember that Afghanistan, of which the Taliban, by another name, these fighters at that time, were able to drive the Soviets out of Afghanistan at one point. In Jerusalem, the Palestinian president, or at least the date line is Jerusalem, I suspect it may be somewhere in the Palestinian territories, the Palestinian president, Yasser Arafat, repeated a ceasefire order to the Palestinian people in a New Year's greeting which he sent to Israelis to mark the Jewish New Year. The Israeli prime minister is quoted, at least here, I'm not sure this is correct, says Israel will not bend over backwards to help the U.S. attract Arab country support after the attacks on the U.S. last week. Those are just dispatches from mostly from the Associated Press in the Middle East. And here is the Attorney General, John Ashcroft.
The investigation into Tuesday's attack is still moving vigorously. I want to express my appreciation to the thousands of agents and support staff of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are literally working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, following leads in the investigation. Their work has been excellent. I join the American people in thanking them for their dedication to the country. The number of tips and potential leads coming into the FBI has been very substantial. We've received helpful leads from both the 1-800 number and the website, and are grateful for the American people and their participation in this investigation. To date, the hotline has received more than 7,700 phone calls. The website, 47,000 potential leads. Let me repeat, those two resources are important for us and for the public. Any member of the public that has information that may be helpful to the investigation, please call 1-866-483-5137. The toll-free calling number is 1-866-483-5137. Or you can reach us at the internet at www.ifbccfbi.gov. In an effort to assist the FBI with manpower, I have directed the U.S. Marshals Service to assign more than 300 deputy marshals to provide needed assistance to FBI field offices. These deputy marshals will be assigned to the various locations across the country to augment and enhance the ongoing investigation and the responsibilities we have. While the FBI has always had a law enforcement presence in the air, the Department of Transportation has decided to expand our country's law enforcement capacities in that respect. Each day as flights increase, we will be adding additional enforcement officials from the Department of Justice as air marshals on planes, in addition to the already heightened security on the ground in airports. These additional law enforcement officials from various federal agencies are being assigned to the FAA to ensure aircraft passenger safety. Yesterday, I met with several members of the House and Senate leadership, including the leadership of the Intelligence and Judiciary Committees. FBI Director Mueller and I discussed with them the current threat assessment, including our belief that associates of the hijackers that have ties to terrorist organizations may be a continuing presence in the United States. This threat assessment has helped us to identify several areas where we should strengthen our laws to increase the ability of the Department of Justice and its component agencies to identify, prevent, and punish terrorism. The meetings we had were very productive, and I'm optimistic that we will be able to act quickly to provide law enforcement with the additional tools that are necessary to fight terrorism. I was encouraged by the members' support and their pledge to work as members of the Congress with the Department of Justice to move this agenda of anti-terrorism legislation forward. In the next few days, we intend to finalize a package of legislative measures that will be comprehensive. Areas covered include criminal justice, immigration, intelligence gathering, and financial infrastructure. And while the final details are still being discussed, I can highlight a few of the items that we will address in the proposal. Under intelligence gathering, we want to provide additional tools to collect intelligence on terrorists, including expanded electronic surveillance, search authority, and the ability to identify, seize, and forfeit terrorist assets. Two specific changes we have proposed include: first, current law requires us to obtain a wiretap for a phone number. It does not allow us to obtain a wiretap authority for an individual. Well, with the advances in technology, we need to make sure that our laws are also advancing. We're proposing that we provide wiretaps so that you can assign the wiretap to the individual, so that we can gain intelligence from individuals who use multiple telephones and changing cellular phones that move around with individuals. You understand that assigning the authority only to the hardware means that when a person changes hardware, we lose our capacity to surveil. And given the nature and availability of literally disposable telephones in modern society, we need to be able to have the court authority to monitor not the phone, but the telephone communications of a person, and to have that authority stay with the person. Second, current law requires that we obtain a separate wiretap in each jurisdiction of the country where an investigation is being pursued. We would like to change the law so that one wiretap approval can be obtained for all jurisdictions working on an investigation. particularly given the mobility of individuals and the capacity of individuals who are mobile to communicate. This is a reasonable upgrade in our opportunity to help us curtail and combat the threat. I want to assure you that in our effort to make sure that law enforcement can gain the intelligence that it needs in order to protect America, we are also mindful of our responsibility to protect the rights and privacy of Americans. Within the area of criminal justice, we want to make sure that our laws convey the seriousness of the crime of terrorism. First, we want to eliminate the statute of limitations for prosecution of terrorism crimes. Second, we feel it is imperative to make sure that terrorism is made the same kind of priority, that we would be able to fight with the same kind of integrity and equally strong tools that other crimes are subjected to. For example, we are identifying instances where the law currently makes it easier to prosecute drug trafficking and organized crime or espionage than it is to prosecute terrorism. If terrorism has not had a priority in the criminal justice system previously, it's time for us to understand that it needs to be a priority in the criminal justice system now. Let me give you two examples we have for increasing the penalties and elevating our capacity to deal with terrorism. A person who harbors a person involved in espionage is subject to stiffer penalties than a person who harbors an individual involved in terrorism. We think this reflects an inadequate response to the kind of threat that terrorism poses to our culture. Within financial infrastructure, it is important to have an understanding in our laws of the result of offering financial support to a terrorist. Understanding will not only give us the ability to adequately punish those who assist terrorists, but also move toward dismantling the infrastructure of terrorist organizations. We are proposing providing material support or resources to a terrorist organization an offense that would enable us to prosecute someone under the money laundering statutes. Now, we will be working diligently over the next day or maybe two to finalize this comprehensive proposal. And we will call upon the Congress of the United States to enact these important anti-terrorism measures this week. We need these tools to fight the terrorism threat which exists in the United States, and we must meet that growing threat. Now I call upon Director Mueller for remarks.
Good afternoon. Before I spend a moment discussing the current investigation, I want to talk briefly about another area of the FBI's responsibilities, and that relates to civil rights. Since the horrific attacks on September 11th, dozens of retaliatory hate crimes have been directed at members of the Arab American community, including assaults, arsons, threatening communications, and two possibly, and I say possibly, ethnically motivated murders. Many of these criminal acts have been directed at Muslim houses of worship and at Muslim community centers. And I'll make it very clear, vigilante attacks and threats against Arab Americans will not be tolerated. Though we are all saddened by the recent acts of terrorism against our nation, such acts of retaliation violate federal law
and more particularly run counter to the very principles of equality and freedom upon which our nation is founded. The FBI and the Department of Justice are committed to aggressively investigating and prosecuting violations of the federal hate crime laws. We to date have initiated 40 hate crime investigations involving reported attacks on Arab American citizens and institutions. And we are working with the Department of Justice to review other incidents to see if federal violations have taken place. I might also add that the FBI is reaching out to leaders of the Arab American community in each of our 56 field offices across the country. One other note before we discuss briefly this investigation. I want to announce that the FBI is again calling upon the support and assistance of the American people. We are actively seeking and recruiting English-speaking individuals with professional level proficiency in Arabic and Farsi. Those who would wish to join this program must be American citizens who have been permanent residents in the United States for at least 3 of the last 5 years. Each of these individuals who would seek to be employed by the FBI will be evaluated based on experience and education and must pass a thorough background investigation and a language proficiency examination. We ask that anyone who is interested in this and has the proficiency to call 1-866-483-5137, and let me repeat that, 1-866-483-5137. Call that number or check the FBI website at www.fbi.gov. Now, turning to the ongoing investigation, I'll say that we now have 500 personnel here in FBI headquarters, representative of 32 agencies, federal, state, and local, working 24 hours a day, coordinating the investigation across the country. And I should say also internationally, because we have more than 30 FBI league out offices across the world involved in the investigation. The AG, Attorney General, already mentioned that we've had 47,000 internet tips. Our hotline has produced 7,800 tips. In addition to that, we've had in excess of 26,000 leads generated through the various field offices. I might finish up by saying that we have, in the course of questioning a number of individuals throughout the country, we have 49 individuals who are currently being detained by the Immigration Service because of some concerns about the status of those individuals in the country. And with that, I think the Attorney General and I would be happy to answer questions.
Are language barriers hindering the investigation? Is that why you're looking for people to speak Arabic and Farsi?
We have had a language shortage for a period of time. And I don't think it would be just the FBI. I think it's a number of federal agencies. And we feel at this point in time we can use the additional manpower helping us on with the language issues.
Director, how many people have you arrested on material witness warrants or other warrants?
I cannot and will not give you the total numbers on material witness warrants. It suffices to say that there are a number of material witness warrants that have been issued. They are sealed in most cases, and I cannot give you direct numbers. Yes, sir.
Director, why can't you give us those direct numbers?
Under seal. A number of the warrants are under seal. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you at least characterize their level of cooperation at this point? People that you've detained and also the people who are in INS custody. If you're talking to them and if they've been providing valuable information.
Well, it's hard to generalize. There are individuals cooperating, yes. there are a number of individuals that are not cooperating. Next question. Yes, sir.
I'm sure you're aware of reports
Director of the
that there
FBI, Robert Mueller, and the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, saying some very interesting things in terms of the development of the investigation and the additional authority that the Justice Department and other organizations of federal government may seek to strengthen, as they put it, the fight against terrorism. Mr. Mueller also talking there about hate crimes in the country. It's interesting, he makes a reference to hate crimes against Arab Americans, but there are many other people in the country who are frightened, including Pakistanis, Iranians, Afghans, and Indians as well. And yet, at the same time, when they want a language volunteer, he's asking for volunteers in Arabic and Farsi. Farsi not spoken by Arabs, of course, spoken by Persians or Iranians. But there's a lot of that going on in the country, and they're very concerned about that. John, we got about 30 seconds to make one observation here. The Attorney General is looking to strengthen the laws in terms of fighting with terrorism, and it's something they've been looking forward to for a long time.
This is similar to a package they ran up the hill with after the crash of TWA Flight 800, which they thought was terrorism. And I think they're seizing on the moment and the momentum of this case and how much it has upset the American people and concerned the Congress to see if they can get that package and a little bit more through this time.
Okay, thanks very much, John Mueller. We'll stay on top of this, obviously, throughout the afternoon. The other news is that the New York Stock Exchange has opened again. The market is down, but nobody seems to be alarmed by it. 538 points at the moment, particularly. And the Federal Reserve cut a key interest rate today, which people think generally helped with the economy, at least in the short run. I'm Peter Jennings. I hope you'll stay with us.
For continuing coverage of this story, stay with ABC News and abcnews.com on the web. This has been a special report from ABC News.
This is ABC.